What is up, Odd Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and I think with the recent study that came out that's being publicized by all the news networks and everyone's talking about it, I felt it was appropriate to update the list of mistakes people make when doing the 16-8, because it is very apparent to me that the group that was in the intervention group did a lot of mistakes while using the method, which caused the increase in muscle loss and the inefficiency in burning body fat. I'm gonna go ahead and break this down in this video. Alright guys, quickly before we start, this video is brought to you by yours truly, Fledge Fitness and the Fledge Fitness Jump Rope. If you haven't gotten yours yet, what are you waiting for? With an ergonomic design, aluminum handle, and swivel design, you can't go wrong with the Fledge Fitness Jump Rope. Only $16.50. You can click on the top right hand corner of this video or down in the description box below. And of course, as always guys, thank you for your support. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the video. Alright, so one of these three things is going to be controversial. And the only reason it's going to be controversial is going to be internally controversial. But with data and studies and understanding meta-analysis, you have to be able to shift your thought or understanding of specific methods and specific tools when the science becomes overwhelming or when the emerging research starts to change the dynamic of certain aspects. Okay, so the first thing that we need to jump into right away that I need to tackle, which can be the top three mistakes as seen by this study, is that protein intake is not paramount or not very important to a lot of people who do the 16-8. Now, mind you, this study did ad libitum, which means that the participants can eat how much they want and whatever they want. And they clearly chose to not consume enough protein. You have to consume protein. It just has to happen. If you don't, it will definitely be a detriment and you can lose muscle because it's not necessarily based on the fact that you're fasting, but it's basically based on the fact that you don't have adequate protein intake. Try your best as much as you can to try to get protein to be the highest macronutrient on the plate. That way you ensure more adequate protein intake. Technically, you should be taking in at least 0.7 grams of protein per lean body mass if you want to build muscle or maintain muscle. So if you are trying to grow muscle and lose fat at the same time, you should try to get 0.7 grams of protein per lean mass. Mind you, it's lean mass, not total mass or weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, but your actual lean mass is 130 pounds, you want to get 0.7 grams for 130 pounds of your lean mass. That will help you grow and even maintain muscle mass. And it's incredibly important. I cannot overstate how important it is to have muscle on your body. It is the primary driver for your metabolic rate. So if you want to increase your metabolic rate consistently with high predictability and ensure that you can eat more while still burning more, you want to build muscle. It's just as clear cut as that. That is why you can see someone who is very muscular have a little bit of fat and lose that fat very quickly because of all of the muscles that they have. It's less work for them to get to a lower body fat percentage because of all the muscle that they carry. Muscle is the primary driver for your metabolic rate and increases calorie partitioning away from body fat. So if you're eating 2,000 calories, depending on how much muscle you have, the more calories have to be distributed to power that muscle. The less you have, the less calories have to be distributed or partitioned to carry that muscle, which means more calories can be stored as body fat. So it's a win-win-win the more muscle you have. So don't go into 16-8 and think you can eat whatever you want without focusing on increasing protein intake. And trust me, people eat salads and just vegetables and stuff without putting in protein on their plate. Does it have to be from meat? No, but you should not just be eating carbohydrates. Even complex carbohydrates or whole foods meals, your macronutrients still should have a high protein count on your plate. To add one more thing on top of this, protein has the highest thermic effect. So when consuming protein, it takes about 30% of that protein intake to just break it down in terms of calorie burning. So if you ate 100 calories of protein, your net intake after your calorie burn just from digesting and consuming that protein would actually be 70 calories. Net intake, not 100 calories. And that is not the case for carbohydrates, and that is definitely not the case for fats. So increase your protein intake. I beg of you. This study is a very important understanding of what can happen when protein intake is not controlled for. Now let's go ahead and move on to number 2. There are limitations to 16-8, but there are benefits to 16-8 as well. What's the limitations to 16-8? Well, we know that from the studies that we've seen and from the mechanistic data that we've seen, that there is a metabolic switchover that takes place from 8 to 12 hours. When that switchover takes place, when you hit that post-absorptive range, what ends up happening is you are now in a position where you are burning body fat specifically for fuel as it transitions the fatty acids into ketone bodies to provide energy towards the brain, as you have now depleted the glycogen stores. So let's be as conservative as possible. It'll activate this process at 12 hours. That means if you're doing the 16-8, you technically only have around 4 hours where you're consistently burning body fat. The longer you go with other intermittent fasting protocols, the more time you have in that post-absorptive range. That's where the limitations come from 16-8. However, you are still burning body fat with the 16-8, but you aren't burning as much per day as, for example, maybe the warrior diet with 20 hours of fasting, or one meal a day with 23 hours of fasting. But with every yin, there's always a yang. What's the benefit of 16-8? The benefit of 16-8 is that it is actually the best protocol if you still want to do intermittent fasting and build muscle efficiently, because protein synthesis is the major factor for muscle growth. We know that resistance training increases your protein synthesis, which creates hypertrophy, increasing volume, increasing load. Those kind of things lends to protein synthesis, but also increasing, being at a caloric surplus, that helps you with increasing protein synthesis, as well as increasing protein intake, doing up to 0.7 grams of protein per lean body weight. That increases protein synthesis, but also meal frequency. So if 16-8 gives you a benefit that the other ones don't give you, it is the benefit of providing an intermittent fasting system that still helps you adequately increase muscle as well as adequately retain muscle versus all of the other protocols. This is why the 16-8 was called lean gains, because you can fast, but you can also spread your meals enough and get enough food in because of the time frame that you can still be effective with building muscle or retaining muscle. So use the advantages that come with the 16-8. Don't create a disadvantage by not eating enough protein and not creating meal frequency when you can do up to 3 meals with 5 hours in between. Now let's go on to the controversial one. And the reason this is controversial is because this is the opposite of what I said in my last video on this topic in terms of big mistakes with 16-8. But keep in mind that this is because with science, over time, information can change. And this is eating earlier rather than later. In my previous video, I said to eat later rather than earlier, and that is because the data was showing us that if you are in a fasted state and your most active time frame, which tends to be earlier rather than later, you are burning more calories and you're effectively burning more body fat because you're in a post-absorptive stage. You're in that metabolic switchover. But because of early time restricted feeding and its connection to your circadian rhythm, it is being seen that it is actually more beneficial because of your metabolic rate and how that goes up and dips throughout the day, that it is better for you in terms of calorie burning and even body fat to eat earlier rather than later. But before you go, oh my God, I don't want to eat in the morning, please understand that earlier is a very wide range. It's all the way from like 8 in the morning all the way down to about 4 p.m. The range is wide, and obviously that's just based off of the studies that we've seen. But there's no set number. You can go a little bit past 4, what have you. Just leaning earlier than later, it's better because it's in line with your circadian rhythm, which helps you burn more body fat. Your window could always technically open at 8, but you don't have to eat at 8. Whatever's comfortable for you, just try to create some meal frequency to also increase muscle retention or even muscle growth. So I hope this video helped you guys. And as always, I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon. I'm going to go ahead and put their names right